Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your cybersecurity series. My name is Vlad, and I'm here to help you and support you in your cybersecurity journey, even if perhaps you don't have a technical background. If, like me today, you are suffering from the summer heat, well, here is a brand new, fresh episode for you. Today it's episode 30, and we are finally wrapping everything we've seen so far in cryptography, reusing all of that, and building upon this knowledge. We will talk today about digital signatures and certificates more specifically. You will see that these have nothing to do with artists' signatures on paintings, just like Vincent van Gogh here. But it's really building upon everything we've seen so far. So I will make a lot of references to episode 28 and 29 when we talked about asymmetric encryption and hash functions. You will see that it really recaps everything and everything fits together. Enjoy this episode. So, first of all, we need to wrap up a bit on what are the cybersecurity properties and our objectives when we talk about cryptography. Back from my very first episode, episode one, I think, I told you about the three cybersecurity properties, which are like the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. However, here, in the context of email encryption or communications in general, we are not so much bothered by the availability because availability is a question of operators making sure that, for example, the phone, emails, Telegram, all of that is being available to us, but it's really beyond the realm of cybersecurity. Here, when we look at the digital world, we really focus on confidentiality and integrity first. So, confidentiality, meaning making sure that only the intended recipients can read our message. Integrity, making sure that nothing has been modified or altered or framed in between the sender and the recipient, and also other properties that are interesting. So one of them would be the authentication. So making sure that we know who we are talking with, who we are discussing with or exchanging messages with. It's it's both from the sender and the recipient's perspective. So both of them need to be able to confirm who is on the other side of the communication channel. And fourth, there is another property that we have not seen so far. It's called non-repudiation. And this property applies at different stages in the communication. It can apply at the origin, so making sure that the sender cannot deny having written the message. It can also be applied in transit, so making sure that the sender cannot deny having sent the message, or also from the recipient perspective, making sure that the recipient cannot deny having received the message. So that property is a bit technical. You will sometimes see it in some references or some articles. The truth is that it's really hard within a communication channel to verify that property. So I will not insist on it too much today. It often requires in-depth forensic investigation to make sure that someone has, for example, read the email. So making sure that someone has read it is very different from making sure he has received it, because you might sometimes mark an element as read without even reading it. So it's really different when we talk about people reading emails than IT systems receiving emails. But I won't insist more on that. So today we will focus on the confidentiality, integrity, and authentication. So first of all, the confidentiality. Sorry, this is what we talked about in episode 28. We are using asymmetric encryption. You remember this is the concept relying on a pair of keys. So we have two keys. Everybody has a set of two keys. One is always made public. That's what we call the public key. And one is always kept for ourselves, kept secret, which is why we call it the secret key. And they work in pairs, meaning that anything that has been encrypted with a public key can only be decrypted with the corresponding secret key. So here in this example, we have Bob. I told you about Bob and Alice. Bob wants to send a short message to Alice, like hello. This message is going to be encrypted with Alice's public key, and only Alice, with her own private key, is going to be able to decrypt and read the message. Again, by doing so, we are only making sure that the very first property is being respected. We are only ensuring the confidentiality. In this setup, there is nothing about the integrity and there is nothing about the authentication. So we need to move further and we need to build upon what we have seen in episode 29, those hash functions. As I told you, and feel free to go back to the previous episode if it's still unclear to you, a hash function is something that takes as an input any type of document. It can be a word, it can be a sentence, it can be a full Harry Potter book of hundreds of pages, it can be a movie, it can be pictures, anything you want. But the idea is that once you hash it, so when you use a hashing function, you get what we call a hash or a digest as a result. And this digest is always the same size, the same length, and it's kind of the signature of the content. But the key principle about hashing function is that any modification on the input is going to change the digest entirely. And the second property that we talked about also is that collisions are meant to be extremely hard to find, meaning that if two documents are different, the hashes or the digests are going to be different as well. And we are going to use this concept of hashing in order to verify the integrity. So let's put ourselves in the scenario where we are sending an email, and so we want to send and encrypt a communication, and I will show you how we can use both asymmetric encryption and the concept of digital signatures or hashing functions. So step by step. First, we have a plain message. We are going to hash this message. So we get a hash or a digest, and this hash, we are going to encrypt it with our own private key. So we get an encrypted hash. Aside to that, or in parallel of that, we are going to use the recipient's public key to make sure that only the recipient is being able to read the message, and we are going to encrypt the plain message. We get the encrypted message, we get an encrypted hash, we put both of them together, and that will be our encrypted correspondence, so our encrypted message here. And we are done. Then, from a recipient perspective, they are going to retrieve this encrypted message. They are going to decompose it and retrieve the two different components. So, first, the encrypted message, and then the encrypted hash. So, starting with the encrypted message, this is something they can decrypt immediately because they are going to use their own private key as a recipient, and they are going to retrieve the plain message. This plain message is going to be hashed at reception. So they are going to compute what is the hash of the message they received. In parallel of that, they add, of course, the encrypted hash that we prepared in the first step. They take our public key, so the sender's public key, they decrypt the hash, and what they are going to do is that they are going to compare both hashes together. So the hash that they computed at the reception and the hash that we as a sender produced and attached to the email. If there is any difference in between the two hashes, then we know that something happened in transit or someone has modified the message, probably fraudulently. Either there was a mistake or an error in transit, maybe there was something, I don't know, like a faulty or bug within the communication, or someone voluntarily misled the correspondence. But the idea is that if there is any difference into the hashes, you can just drop the correspondence, drop the message, because you know it's not reliable anymore. If, on the contrary, both hashes match, then you have the assurance that the message that was sent and written by the sender is indeed what you are getting as a recipient. So we have preserved both the confidentiality and the integrity. There is only one question left to be answered. It's really about this question of where do we find those public keys and can we really trust the public key? Because in the end, anyone could pretend to be Alice and say, well, here is the public key of Alice. Feel free to use it if you want to send any message to Alice. Well, that's where we land on the notion of certificates. And in cybersecurity, it's extremely hard to trust others, which is why we have put in place certain measures, and digital certificates is one of them. So basically, they are what we call certificate authorities. These are institutes, organizations, companies that are meant to be trusted by everyone, or at least by the general public. And what they do is that they issue digital certificates. In a certificate, you get the identity of a person, like Jane Doe or like Alice or Bob. You get also an expiration date, meaning that those certificates are only valid within a certain period of time. Most of the time, it's about a couple of years. and it also gives the public key of that person. So it's really the job of the certificate authority to check whether Alice is who she pretends to be, or check that Microsoft is who they pretend to be, or check that any organization is who they pretend to be. In practice, if you want to go even deeper into the technical aspects, a certificate authority also has a pair of asymmetric keys. They have their own secret key and they have a public key as a certificate authority. And what they do is that with their secret key, they are going to stamp your public key. By doing that, they acknowledge that they trust you and everybody should trust you as well. Meaning that when someone else comes in and say, well, I want to send a message to Alice, the certificate authority says, well, here is the digital certificate. If you trust me, you can trust Alice. And trusting me means the person who comes is going to use the certificate authority public key and decrypt the digital certificate. By doing so, they are going to extract the fact that, okay, this is Alice, this is the public key I should be using when talking to Alice. Okay, fine, and they can proceed with what we have seen so far. So, how does it look? Here is the amended version with the digital certificates. As you can see, in the very first step, the sender is going to retrieve the recipient's digital certificate. They are going to verify it, and that's where they are going to extract the recipient's public key. And on the recipient's perspective, it's absolutely the same thing. Before proceeding with the decryption, etc., and the verification of the hashes, they are going to retrieve the sender's digital certificate, verify it with the certificate authority, get the sender's public key, and then proceed, as we have seen, with the decryption. So, having said that, you can really understand that those certificate authorities, they are absolutely critical, and which is why they are a prime targets of any hackers or any malicious organizations. Because if you manage to um, impersonate a certificate authority, or worse, steal their private key, you can basically sign any digital certificate that you want. You can create fake identities. You can say, well, yes, this is Alice, but it's not Alice, it's actually Eve or any other malicious entity. You can also bypass antiviruses because the concept of signatures does not only apply to email communication. You can sign a piece of software and say, well, yes, this new update of Microsoft is absolutely legitimate. You can trust me. I'm the certificate authority and I know Microsoft well, but actually, maybe not. Maybe it's a virus, a malware that is being passed as legitimate. Similarly, you can sign fraudulent HTTPS websites, connections to the websites, and provide websites with a fake certificate. You can also embed, just like I said, you can sign pieces of software. So it can be a malware directly, or it can be sometimes also a fraudulent piece of code like a library. And this library is going to be exposed to any developer. And you know how it works. Developers today, they import libraries from third parties in order to build on top of them. For example, you are going to import a library in Python that is enabling you to manage different date formats. You import that, but maybe this library was malicious and was signed by a certificate authority that was compromised. There have been many examples, but the idea is that certificate authorities and digital certificates in general are absolutely critical in cybersecurity. And I hope now you understand why. And that's why you should be always careful when you see websites that are not HTTPS, for example. It means that no certificate authority has recognized them. So that's always a risk. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's really wrapping up everything we talked about. So remember, it's if you are interested in cybersecurity, then you should definitely remember this is how we combine asymmetric encryption hashes together in order to preserve the confidentiality, the integrity, and also the authentication thanks to the digital certificates. Thank you very much. That's all for today. In the next episode, we will do a complete wrap up, a bit more in depth, in order to give also people a perspective on everything we talked about. Don't hesitate to, give a shout out in the comments or drop a question if you have one. I would be happy to reply as usual. Take care and see you soon.